Beneath the monuments, beneath the textbooks, beneath the stories we tell ourselves at night, lies another America. An America built on secrets too dark to speak, on crimes too vast to comprehend, on choices that haunt us still. For 2 hours, we will walk through shadows. We will uncover what was buried. We will speak the names of the forgotten. This is not the history you learned in school. This is the history that keeps historians awake at night. Welcome to the darkness. Before America was America, before the name was even whispered, this land held 50 million indigenous souls. The Taíno people greeted Columbus with gifts of gold and food. Within 50 years, they were extinct, not by accident, by design. Columbus himself wrote, "They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all." He instituted a quota system. Every Taíno over 14 years old had to deliver a hawk's bell full of gold dust every 3 months. Those who failed had their hands cut off. They were left to bleed to death as a warning to others. Within 2 years, half of the 250,000 Taíno on Haiti were dead. By 1548, fewer than 500 remained. This was not the age of exploration. This was the age of extermination, and it was only the beginning. August 1619, a ship arrives in Virginia carrying 20 Africans. They are listed in the cargo manifest between livestock and supplies. America's original sin begins not with a declaration, but with an invoice. Over the next 246 years, 12 million Africans will be torn from their homes. 2 million will die in the Middle Passage alone. But the true horror isn't in the numbers, it's in the details. Enslaved people were bred like animals. Slave breeding farms operated across Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky. One Virginia enslaver, Robert Lumpkin, ran a fancy trade, selling light-skinned enslaved women for sexual exploitation. His jail in Richmond held hundreds awaiting sale. Children were ripped from their mothers at age 8, sold to distant plantations, never to see their families again. In Louisiana, the sugar mansions were death factories. Enslaved people had a life expectancy of 7 years after beginning work in refineries. 7 years. They worked 18-hour days during harvest season. Severed fingers from mill accidents were so common they barely merited mention in plantation records. And when slavery finally ended in 1865, what replaced it was arguably worse. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, with one exception. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, shall exist within the United States. That single exception became a loophole large enough to swallow a people whole. Southern states immediately passed black codes, laws that criminalized unemployment, loitering, breaking a labor contract. Suddenly, thousands of freed black Americans were arrested for invented crimes. They were leased to plantations, coal mines, railroad companies. It was slavery by another name, but now the state profited. In Alabama's coal mines, convict laborers died at 3 times the rate of free miners. One camp had a 45% annual death rate. Their bodies were dumped in unmarked graves, no records kept, no families notified. This system lasted until 1928 in some states, nearly as long as slavery itself had endured. But while convict leasing eventually ended, another horror was just beginning. Between 1877 and 1950, 4,400 black Americans were lynched in 12 southern states. But even that number tells only part of the story. Lynchings were not random acts of violence. They were community events, spectacle executions attended by thousands. Families brought picnic lunches. Children watched from their fathers' shoulders. Photographers sold postcards of the bodies. In 1916, 17-year-old Jesse Washington was lynched in Waco, Texas. 15,000 people attended. Spectators fought over pieces of his charred body as souvenirs. The event was photographed extensively. The images were sold as postcards with captions like "Barbecue in Waco." Mary Turner was 8 months pregnant when a Georgia mob lynched her husband. When she threatened to press charges, they came for her. They hung her upside down, doused her in gasoline, and set her on fire. As she burned, someone cut her baby from her womb. The infant cried briefly before being crushed under a boot. No one was ever arrested. This was America's reality for 73 years, an entire human lifetime, and the world simply looked away. Kill the Indian, save the man. These were the words of Captain Richard Henry Pratt, founder of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Beginning in 1879, the U.S. government forcibly removed Native American children from their families and placed them in boarding schools. Their hair was cut, their names were changed, their languages were forbidden. Any child caught speaking their native tongue was beaten. But cultural erasure was only the beginning. At these schools, children were worked to exhaustion. They were denied adequate food and medical care. They were subjected to bizarre medical experiments. Tuberculosis swept through the dormitories. Rather than close the schools or improve conditions, administrators simply dug more graves. At Carlisle alone, nearly 200 children died. Their bodies were buried in unmarked plots behind the school. In 2021, when officials finally began excavating former boarding school sites, they found hundreds of additional graves. In Canada, where the same system operated, more than 1,300 unmarked graves have been discovered so far. The last Indian boarding school didn't close until 1973. Some of those children are still alive today, still carrying the scars. The United States signed 374 treaties with indigenous nations between 1778 and 1871. It violated every single one. The Cherokee Nation had a written constitution, a Supreme Court, a newspaper. By every measure, they had assimilated to American society. It didn't matter. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. The Cherokee were given 2 years to abandon their ancestral lands. When they refused, 7,000 U.S. troops arrived. Families were dragged from their homes at gunpoint. They were allowed to take nothing. 16,000 Cherokee were forced to march 1,200 miles to Oklahoma. It was winter. 4,000 died along the way, 1 in 4. They died from starvation, exposure, disease. Mothers carried dead children for days, having no time to bury them. But the Cherokee were not alone. The Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations all faced forced removal. Combined death toll over 15,000. And once the survivors reached Oklahoma, the government took that land too. In 1889, the government opened unassigned lands in Oklahoma to white settlers. 2 million acres, land promised to native nations as long as grass grows and water flows, were given away in a single day. The land run of 1889 is celebrated in Oklahoma history. It's literally on the state's license plates. A celebration of theft, a monument to broken promises. February 19, 1942. President Franklin Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9066. It contains no mention of Japan or Japanese Americans. It simply authorizes the military to exclude any persons from designated areas. But everyone knows what it means. Within weeks, 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry are given 7 days to report to assembly centers. 2/3 are American citizens. They can bring only what they can carry. Homes are sold for pennies on the dollar. Businesses built over generations are liquidated in days. One family sells their entire flower farm for $150.
They are sent to 10 camps in America's most desolate locations: Manzanar, California; Heart Mountain, Wyoming; Tula Lake, California. Entire families live in single rooms. Barracks have no insulation. Temperatures drop below zero in winter, rise above 110 degrees in summer. Armed guards watch from towers. Machine guns point inward, not out. When inmates at Tula Lake protest their conditions, military police fire into the crowd. One man is killed, dozens wounded. Pregnant women give birth in these camps. Children celebrate birthdays behind barbed wire. High school graduations are held in mess halls. 3 full years of American lives stolen by their own government. In 1988, President Reagan finally apologized and signed the Civil Liberties Act, paying $20,000 to each survivor. By then, more than half had died. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service recruits 600 black men in Macon County, Alabama, for a medical study. 399 have syphilis, 201 do not. All are told they're receiving free health care for bad blood. They are not. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male was never designed to help anyone. It was designed to watch black men die. Researchers wanted to document the full progression of untreated syphilis, from infection to insanity to death. The men were never told they had syphilis. When penicillin became widely available in 1947, a complete cure, they were intentionally not treated. Doctors actively prevented them from receiving penicillin. When World War II draft boards offered treatment, researchers intervened to exclude the Tuskegee subjects. For 40 years, these men suffered. Their wives contracted syphilis. Their children were born with congenital syphilis. At least 28 men died directly from syphilis. 100 more died from related complications. 40 wives were infected. 19 children were born with the disease. Throughout it all, researchers published papers, won awards, advanced their careers. The study only ended in 1972 when a whistleblower leaked information to the press. By then, more than half of the original subjects had still alive. In 1998, President Reagan finally apologized to the 8 remaining survivors. 8 men out of 600. The Tuskegee study wasn't an aberration. It was American science operating exactly as designed.
1900. 2 million American children work full-time jobs. 1 in 5 children between the ages of 10 and 15 is employed. In the coal mines of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, boys as young as 8 work as breaker boys, sitting hunched over conveyor belts for 10 hours a day, picking slate from coal. The slate shreds their fingers, the coal dust blackens their lungs, falls from the machinery crush their bones. In textile mills across the South, children tend spinning machines that never stop. They work 12-hour night shifts. If they fall asleep, supervisors beat them. If they lose focus for a second, the machines tear off fingers, hands, entire arms. The canneries are worse. Children as young as 6 shuck oysters, their hands raw and infected from constant cuts. In seafood processing plants, 3-year-olds work alongside their mothers, standing on boxes to reach the tables. Photographer Lewis Hine documented this world between 1908 and 1924. He posed as a salesman or insurance agent to get inside factories and mines. His photographs showed America what it was desperately trying to ignore. In one photograph, a boy named Manuel stares at the camera. He's 5 years old. He's been working for a year. The factory owner told Hine he'll be able to work soon. Child labor wasn't fully banned until the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. An entire generation of American children was fed into machines, and the machines ground them to dust. Between 1907 and 1979, more than 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized by their own government. They were poor, they were disabled, they were deemed unfit to reproduce. Indiana passed the first eugenic sterilization law in 1907. 31 states eventually followed. The targets were anyone authorities deemed feeble-minded, insane, dependent, diseased, blind, deaf, deformed, or simply orphaned. In reality, it was a war on the poor and non-white. Carrie Buck was 18 when the state of Virginia had her sterilized. Her crime? Being the daughter of a poor woman institutionalized for feeble-mindedness. In reality, Carrie had been raped by the nephew of her foster parents. To cover up the rape, they had her committed. Her case went to the Supreme Court. In 1927, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes delivered the decision. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, he wrote. The court ruled 8-1 in favor of forced sterilization. That decision has never been overturned. California sterilized more than 20,000 people, 1/3 of the national total. Prisons and state hospitals became sterilization factories. Latino and black women were especially targeted. Some were sterilized without their knowledge during other medical procedures. In the 1960s and 70s, Indian Health Service physicians sterilized at least 3,400 Native American women, many without their consent or understanding. Some were told they were receiving routine procedures, others were coerced while in labor. And the horror didn't end in the distant past. As late as 2010, California prisons were sterilizing female inmates. Between 2006 and 2010, nearly 150 women were sterilized without proper consent. America's eugenic nightmare spanned 72 years and 6 generations. Nazi Germany studied American sterilization laws when designing their own. We taught the world how to do it. In 1921, Tulsa's Greenwood District was the wealthiest black community in America. They called it Black Wall Street. Black doctors, lawyers, and entrepreneurs thrived. The district had its own newspaper, schools, hospitals, and more than 600 businesses. On the morning of May 31st, everything changed. A black teenager named Dick Rowland allegedly assaulted a white elevator operator. He almost certainly didn't. Most likely he stumbled and grabbed her arm to steady himself. But in 1921 Tulsa, the accusation was enough. A white mob gathered at the courthouse, demanding Rowland be lynched. Armed black World War I veterans arrived to protect him. A shot was fired. No one knows who pulled the trigger. What followed was not a riot, it was a massacre. White mobs swept through Greenwood, looting and burning everything in their path. They shot black residents on sight. But the true horror came from above. Private aircraft dropped firebombs on the district. It was the first aerial bombardment of an American city by Americans. 35 city blocks were destroyed. More than 1,200 homes burned. Churches, schools, hospitals, all reduced to ash. The official death toll was listed as 36, 26 black, 10 white. The real number was likely 300. Mass graves were dug. Bodies were dumped in the Arkansas River. Some were burned in the rubble. Survivor testimony speaks of trucks piled with bodies, of people herded into internment centers and held for days without food or water. 10,000 black Tulsans were left homeless. Not one white person was ever convicted of any crime. Insurance companies refused to pay claims. They labeled it a riot. Acts of riot were not covered. And then came the final betrayal: silence. The massacre was erased from history. It wasn't taught in Oklahoma schools. Newspaper archives were destroyed. Even survivors stopped speaking of it, fearing for their safety. For 75 years, one of the worst incidents of racial violence in American history was simply forgotten. In 2001, the Oklahoma Commission issued a report. It found clear evidence of mass graves. It recommended reparations.
As of 2024, not $1 in reparations has been paid. The last survivors are now over 100 years old. They are still waiting for justice. April 2014. To save money, Flint, Michigan switches its water source from Detroit's system to the Flint River. Within weeks, residents notice the water is discolored. It smells strange. It tastes metallic. Officials tell them it's safe to drink. It is not safe.
The Flint River water is highly corrosive. It leaches lead from the city's aging pipes. Lead levels in some homes test 20 times higher than EPA limits. Lead poisoning is irreversible. It causes permanent brain damage, especially in children. Flint's population is 57% black, 40% live below the poverty line. This is not an accident. Internal emails reveal that officials knew about the contamination within weeks. They covered it up for 18 months. While residents complained, state officials threw pizza parties with bottled water they wouldn't let the public drink. 12 people died from Legionnaire's disease caused by the contaminated water. At least 12,000 children were exposed to dangerous lead levels. The damage is permanent. Those children will suffer cognitive impairment for the rest of their lives. But Flint is not unique. A 2016 Reuters investigation found nearly 3,000 areas in the United States with lead poisoning rates higher than Flint. They are predominantly poor. They are predominantly Black and Latino. In East Chicago, Illinois, an entire housing complex was built on toxic waste. Children played in soil contaminated with lead and arsenic. Officials knew for years. They said nothing. Environmental racism is America's ongoing genocide, slower than lynching, quieter than massacre, but just as deliberate. And it continues today in communities across America, while officials look away. In the United States, indigenous women are murdered at 10 times the national average. On some reservations, murder is the third leading cause of death for indigenous women. But these numbers tell only part of the story, because many indigenous women don't show up in any statistics at all. They simply disappear. Savannah LaFontaine Graywind was 8 months pregnant when she vanished from her Fargo apartment in 2017. Her baby was found alive, cut from her womb. Savannah's body was discovered in a river days later. Ashley Loring Heavyrunner disappeared from the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana in 2017. She was 20 years old. Police conducted a minimal search. The FBI never officially got involved. Her case remains unsolved. These are not isolated incidents. A 2018 study found that in some counties, indigenous women are murdered at rates more than 10 times higher than the national average. But here's the chilling part. The National Crime Information Center reports only 5,712 cases of indigenous women missing. The Urban Indian Health Institute found that 5,712 was a dramatic undercount. Their database identified 5,712 cases in just 71 cities. The federal government literally doesn't know how many indigenous women have disappeared. Why? Jurisdictional confusion. When crimes occur on reservations, tribal police, state police, and federal authorities all point fingers at each other. Cases fall through the cracks. Families are told there's nothing that can be done. Roxanne White was 15 when she disappeared from the Crow Reservation in Montana in 1974. Her case was never investigated. Her family held a funeral with an empty casket. In 2021, 47 years later, hikers found her remains. She had been murdered. 47 years her family waited. 47 years without answers. And Roxanne is the lucky one. She was found. Thousands of others remain missing. Their families still wait, still hope, still wonder if today might be the day someone calls. 2018. On the southern border of the United States, a new policy begins: zero tolerance. Every person who crosses illegally will be prosecuted, every single one. But there's a problem. You can't prosecute children. The solution is simple: take the children away. Over 8 months, nearly 3,000 children are separated from their parents at the border. Some are infants, some are toddlers. They're placed in detention facilities the government calls tender age shelters. Leaked photos show children in chain-link enclosures. They sleep on concrete floors under mylar blankets. Guards call them ice boxes because of the temperature. The children cry constantly. Some are so young they can't speak yet. They don't understand where their parents have gone. That audio was recorded inside a detention facility. The Border Patrol agents call it the orchestra. When public outrage forces the policy to end, another problem emerges: reunification. The government kept no systematic records. They don't know which child belongs to which parent.
As of 2024, more than 1,000 children still have not been reunited with their families. Some parents were deported without their children. Some have been unable to be located. These children have been raised in foster care, in group homes, without their parents. A 4-year-old boy told his lawyer he couldn't remember what his mother looked like. A 2-year-old was reunited with her mother after 3 months apart. She no longer recognized her. Physicians use a specific term for what these children experienced: trauma bonding syndrome. The damage may be permanent. But the story doesn't end in 2018. In 2020, a whistleblower at an ICE facility in Georgia reported mass hysterectomies being performed on detained women. Many didn't understand what was happening to them. Some didn't consent. An investigation found jarring lack of consent procedures and incomplete medical records. No one has been charged with a crime. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes. The boarding schools, the internment camps, the forced sterilizations. The methods change, the victims change, but America's willingness to cage the vulnerable, that remains constant. 1984, a Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, releases 40 tons of toxic gas. At least 15,000 people die. Union Carbide was an American company. The disaster was caused by cost-cutting measures implemented from American headquarters. CEO Warren Anderson was arrested in India, then quickly released and flown back to America on a Union Carbide plane. He never returned to India, never faced trial. He died in 2014, a free man. But Union Carbide's crimes weren't limited to India. In West Virginia, the company's plant in Institute released chemicals into the air and water for decades. Workers were exposed to toxic substances without protection. Communities downwind developed cancer at alarming rates. But at least Union Carbide's crimes were accidents, catastrophic negligence, but not intentional. The same cannot be said for DuPont. In the 1950s, DuPont began using a chemical called PFOA to manufacture Teflon at its Washington Works plant in West Virginia. The company's own studies showed PFOA caused cancer, liver damage, and birth defects. They released it into the water supply anyway. For decades, DuPont dumped PFOA into the Ohio River. The company knew it was contaminating drinking water for 70,000 people. They knew pregnant workers exposed to PFOA were giving birth to children with deformities. They said nothing. Attorney Rob Billett spent 20 years fighting DuPont. His investigation uncovered 7,000 pages of internal documents. The documents showed DuPont had known about PFOA's dangers since 1961. They had hidden the evidence for 40 years. In 2004, DuPont finally settled a class action lawsuit. They paid $670 million after making billions from Teflon. No executive ever faced criminal charges. And PFOA? It's in the bloodstream of 99% of Americans today. It never breaks down, ever.
Every American alive today carries chemicals in their blood that a corporation knowingly released, despite knowing they were toxic. This is not history. This is present. This is now. 1996. Purdue Pharma launches OxyContin with an unprecedented marketing campaign. They tell doctors it's less addictive than other opioids. They say fewer than 1% of patients become addicted. It is a lie. Purdue knows it's a lie. Internal documents later reveal that company executives knew OxyContin was highly addictive from the beginning. They marketed it anyway, aggressively. Sales representatives are given bonuses based on prescription volume. They take doctors to lavish dinners, sporting events, resort trips. Purdue Pharma specifically targets vulnerable communities, poor, rural areas already struggling with economic decline. In 1 year, a single pharmacy in Kermit, West Virginia, population 392, receives 9 million pills. 9 million pills for 392 people. Purdue's marketing works. By 2004, OxyContin is a billion-dollar drug. By 2010, it's generating $3 billion annually, and people are dying. By 2017, opioid overdoses kill 47,000 Americans in a single year, more than the peak annual deaths in the Vietnam War. But these aren't enemy combatants. These are mothers, fathers, children. They are teachers, construction workers, nurses. In 2007, Purdue Pharma finally pleads guilty to criminal charges of misleading doctors and patients about OxyContin's addiction risk. The fine? $634 million. The company had already made over $10 billion from OxyContin sales. No executive went to prison. The Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharma, removed billions from the company before it finally declared bankruptcy in 2019. They now live in luxury around the world, their personal fortunes protected.
The 2021 bankruptcy settlement required the Sacklers to pay $4.5 billion. In exchange, they received complete immunity from all future civil litigation. They cannot be sued. They cannot be held accountable. Since 1999, more than 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses. 500,000 people. That's more American deaths than World War II. And the Sackler family name still adorns museums and universities across America. In the wealthiest nation in human history, 40 million Americans live in poverty. 5.3 million live in third-world conditions, without running water, adequate sanitation, or electricity. This is not Bangladesh. This is not Sudan. This is Alabama. This is West Virginia. This is the Navajo Nation. In Lowndes County, Alabama, 90% of homes have failing or non-existent septic systems. Raw sewage pools in yards where children play. Hookworm, a disease of extreme poverty, has returned to the American South. A 2017 study by the UN called it conditions very uncommon in the First World. The state of Alabama claimed the report was politically motivated. On the Navajo Nation, 30% of residents lack running water. They haul it in barrels from wells miles away. This is the same nation that gave America its code talkers, Marines who used the Navajo language to create an unbreakable code in World War II. They helped win the war. America gave them land without water. In American cities, tent encampments grow larger every year. Los Angeles has 40,000 homeless people. New York has 80,000. These are not all addicts or mentally ill, though America has failed those populations too. These are working people, full-time employees who cannot afford rent.
In San Francisco, teachers sleep in their cars. In Los Angeles, nurses live in RVs. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco is $3,000. A full-time minimum wage worker earns $2,080 per month before taxes. The math doesn't work. It can't work. Meanwhile, America's billionaires have increased their wealth by 70% since 2020. Three men, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates, have more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans combined. That's 165 million people. 3 men versus 165 million. America has always had poverty, but it has never been this wealthy while so many suffered. The cruelty isn't the poverty. The cruelty is the choice. America has 5% of the world's population. It has 25% of the world's prisoners. 2.3 million people are currently imprisoned in the United States, more than China, Russia, and Iran combined. How did this happen? In 1980, there were 500,000 people in American prisons. By 2008, there were 2.3 million. The population increased by 500% in 3 decades. Did Americans suddenly become more criminal? No. America became more profitable. In the 1980s, the war on drugs created mandatory minimum sentences. Possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine, about the weight of 5 sugar packets, carried a mandatory 5-year sentence. Crack cocaine was predominantly used in black communities. Powder cocaine, chemically identical, was used in white communities. Powder cocaine carried sentences 100 times more lenient. This was not an accident. A top Nixon aide later admitted, the Nixon campaign in 1968 had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. The war on drugs was never about drugs. It was about control. And it was about money. In 1983, Corrections Corporation of America, now CoreCivic, became the first private prison company. The pitch was simple. Governments pay per prisoner. The more prisoners, the more profit. Private prisons require occupancy quotas, contracts that guarantee 90% capacity. If states don't provide enough prisoners, they pay penalties. This creates a perverse incentive. The system profits from incarceration. Inside these facilities, prisoners work for pennies. Some make as little as 13 cents an hour. They manufacture products for companies like Victoria's Secret, JCPenney, Starbucks. The products are sold at full price. The prisoners see almost none of the money. Remember the 13th Amendment exception. Slavery is legal as punishment for crime. This is that exception in action. And the cycle continues. Prisoners are released with criminal records that prevent employment. Unable to find work, they commit new crimes. They return to prison. It's called recidivism. Within 5 years, 76% of released prisoners are arrested again. The system is designed to fail them because failure is profitable. In 2021, the private prison industry generated $4.9 billion in revenue. Slavery never ended in America. It just became an industry. On any given day, 400,000 children are in America's foster care system. They are there because their parents abused them, neglected them, abandoned them.
The state becomes their parent, and the state fails them, systematically, predictably, repeatedly. The average child in foster care experiences 7 placements before aging out at 18. 7 different homes, 7 different families, 7 times learning to trust, then being moved again. Some experience far more. One child in California had 30 placements in 5 years.
30 homes before she turned 12. In group homes, institutional facilities for children who've been through too many foster families, the conditions can be horrific. A 2020 investigation of Florida's Sequel Youth and Family Services found systematic abuse. Children were beaten, isolated, denied medical care. At one facility, a 15-year-old died after staff restrained him face down for 30 minutes. The company paid a fine. The facility was closed. The executives faced no criminal charges. But even in adequate placements, the outcomes are grim. 20% of foster children become homeless the moment they age out at 18. 50% are unemployed by age 24. Only 3% earn a college degree by age 25. And the abuse doesn't always come from the parents they were taken from. Between 2013 and 2018, more than 1,000 licensed foster families in the U.S. were investigated for abuse or neglect. These are the homes that were supposed to save children. Instead, they traumatize them further. Some children are in foster care because their parents are poor, not abusive, just poor. Studies show that poverty is misinterpreted as neglect. Parents who can't afford childcare, who live in substandard housing, who struggle with food insecurity, they lose their children. The child welfare system removes children from poor families, then provides foster parents with $500 to $1,000 per month per child. That money, given to the original family, could have prevented the removal entirely. But America would rather pay strangers to raise children than support poor parents raising their own. Emma Hernandez aged out of California's foster care system in 2019. She was given $800 and a trash bag for her belongings. She had no family, no support system, no job prospects. Within 3 months, she was sleeping in her car. Emma's story is not unique, it's typical. America spends billions on fighter jets and border walls. It cannot find the resources to protect its own children. In 2021, the remains of 215 indigenous children were discovered at a former residential school in British Columbia. The news shocked Canada. It should not have. Survivors had been saying it for decades. The graves were always there. We simply chose not to look. In 2020, California became the first state to form a reparations task force for descendants of enslaved people. The task force calculated that California owes black residents up to $569 billion in reparations. As of 2024, not $1 has been distributed. In 2019, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution apologizing for slavery and Jim Crow. It was the first time in American history the federal government formally apologized for slavery. It took 155 years after slavery ended. But apologies without action are just words. In Tulsa, survivors of the 1921 massacre have filed lawsuit after lawsuit seeking reparations. In 2023, the Oklahoma Supreme Court dismissed their case. Too much time had passed, the court said. Too much time had passed because the state deliberately hid the massacre from history for 70 years. The last 3 survivors are over 100 years old. They will likely die before seeing justice. Across America, Confederate monuments still stand. Schools still bear the names of slave owners. Military bases honor Confederate generals. When these monuments are challenged, people say you can't erase history. But monuments are not history, they are celebrations. Germany has Holocaust memorials. It does not have statues honoring Nazi generals. It understands the difference between remembering and glorifying. America has not learned this lesson. In 2020, protests swept the nation after George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. Millions marched. Black Lives Matter appeared on streets in every major city. There was hope, perhaps, that this time would be different. 2 years later, police had killed nearly 2,000 more Americans. Black Americans were still killed at 3 times the rate of white Americans. Nothing fundamental changed. Nothing ever does. Because America has never confronted its original sin. It has never acknowledged that this nation was built on theft and slavery, that its wealth was extracted from stolen land using stolen labor, that its institutions were designed to preserve white supremacy. You cannot fix a system without acknowledging what it was designed to do. Trauma doesn't disappear when the traumatic event ends. Scientists now know that severe trauma can alter DNA, changes that are passed to children and grandchildren. The descendants of Holocaust survivors show measurably higher rates of anxiety and PTSD, even those born decades after the war.
The same is true for descendants of enslaved people, of genocide survivors, of those who endured state violence. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. In Native American communities, suicide rates are 3.5 times the national average. Youth suicide rates on some reservations are 10 times higher. This is not random. This is the legacy of genocide, forced assimilation, systematic destruction of culture. When you destroy a people's past, you damage their future. In Black communities, the wealth gap persists unchanged since 1968. The median white family has 10 times the wealth of the median Black family. This is not because of different work ethics or values. This is compound interest on injustice. When your great-great-grandparents were property, when your great-grandparents were sharecroppers working land they could never own, when your grandparents were redlined out of home ownership, when your parents faced employment discrimination, each generation starts from zero, or worse, from debt. White families have had centuries to accumulate wealth. Black families have had decades to try to escape poverty created by law. It is not a fair race when one runner starts miles behind and weighted with chains. In Flint, Michigan, the children poisoned by lead are now teenagers. Their cognitive impairments are permanent. They will struggle in school. They will struggle to find employment. They will earn less over their lifetimes. And their children, growing up in poverty because of their parents' reduced earning potential, will face their own struggles. One decision by state officials in 2014 will echo for generations. This is how injustice perpetuates, not through dramatic acts, but through accumulating disadvantages that compound over time. The question is never, why can't they just move on? The question is, why do we keep creating new trauma while the old trauma still bleeds? America has always been two nations, one promised, one delivered, one proclaimed in declarations and constitutions, one built in laws and customs. For most of American history, the nation delivered matched the nation promised, for some. But that gap is narrowing, not because the powerful have become more generous, but because the excluded have become harder to ignore. By 2045, white Americans will be less than 50% of the U.S. population. The America that was built for one group must now serve all groups or serve none. Young Americans are more diverse than any previous generation. They are also more connected. What previous generations could ignore, police violence in distant cities, poverty in rural counties, injustices on reservations, is now impossible to ignore. Every cruelty is filmed, every injustice is documented, every lie is exposed. This creates a choice. America can reckon with its past, acknowledging what was done, making amends, restructuring institutions that were designed to oppress. Or it can attempt to suppress the reckoning, restricting voting rights, banning books, criminalizing protest. Some states have passed laws making it illegal to teach divisive concepts about race in schools. The concepts they find divisive? Historical facts. They want to ban teaching about the Tulsa Massacre, about Japanese internment, about systemic racism.
But you cannot heal wounds you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot build a just society on a foundation of lies. James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." For 2 hours, we have faced it. The genocides, the slavery, the lynchings, the experiments, the poisonings, the separations, the erasures. We have faced the America that was, the America that is. Now comes the harder question. What will America become? This is not a comfortable history. It was never meant to be. Comfort is the privilege of those who benefit from the system. Truth is the demand of those who suffer under it. Every society has darkness in its past. What distinguishes nations is how they respond to that darkness. Some build monuments to their victims. Some build monuments to their victimizers. Some teach their children the full truth. Some teach their children myths. Some make restitution. Some make excuses. America has been exceptional, but not in the ways it claims. Exceptional in the scale of its contradictions, in the gap between its promises and its practices, in its ability to proclaim liberty while dealing in bondage, to speak of justice while delivering cruelty. But within that contradiction lies possibility. Because if America can betray its ideals so completely, it can also fulfill them. If it can build systems of oppression so effective, it can build systems of justice equally effective. If it can compound injustice across generations, it can compound repair. The question has never been whether America can change. The question is whether America will choose to change. The ghosts are still here. They whisper in the wind over mass graves. They cry out from the soil of lynching sites. They haunt the streets where children were torn from parents. They linger in the water we drink, the air we breathe, the institutions we inhabit. We can continue to ignore them, to build monuments that erase them, to teach history that forgets them. Or we can finally listen. We can name them, honor them, learn from them. We can stop creating new ghosts while the old ones still wait for justice. This is America, built on blood and dreams, theft and hope, cruelty and resilience. It has been many things. What it will become is still being decided by us, right now. The choice has always been ours.